Comics and manga have always been debated against each other. It's always about which one is better, about why manga is better than comics, why comics are better, etc. I never really partook into that. I always appreciated both forms of Western comic books and Japanese manga. I made an entire video talking about the differences in the fight scenes between the two. What I want to talk about is what you can learn from both comic books and manga. I'm a writer and artist myself. I've been wanting to write a webcomic for years that I even published a few chapters of, but I stopped abruptly a couple months back. But then and now, I used comics and manga as inspiration. I learned from them both, and I want to talk about what you can learn from both comic books and manga. Not just the fight scenes, but overall aspects of a story. When I was talking about fight scenes in one of my previous videos, I mentioned how mangas tend to pay a lot more attention to finer details in comics. Action lines, destruction, special effects. I've even had people in my comments point out how mangas tend to focus on cause while comics focus on effect. Usually in manga, you'll notice more aspects like dynamic poses, special effects, perspective. Not saying that it doesn't appear in comics, but just that you'll notice it more in manga. In comics, they tend to pay more attention to the effects, which if done right can look amazing. Using the combination of cause and effect at the same time can make a fight scene that much more convincing, more explosive. In the fight between the Hulk and the Thing, it seems like the illustrator really paid attention to them both. You have the motion lines of Hulk when he throws the Thing away, which is a cause, and you have the panel when the Thing finally is able to knock the Hulk out, shattering his arm and Hulk's jaw. The effect, a perfect combination of the two. In Batman Superman World's Finest issue 17, many superheroes are taking on a more advanced version of Amazo, a robot who's able to copy the abilities of metahumans and just about anyone. There's a page where Superman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter are landing hits on him, and it's mainly focusing on the effect, not the impact of the punches, but directly after. And this is a good example of using that. It might have looked weird if each panel was a direct, at the very moment impact of each of the superheroes' fists on Amazo's face. There's Baki the Grappler. This manga is so crazy. Baki Hanma kidnaps the president George Bush to purposefully land himself in the Arizona State Prison to fight the strongest man in America, Biscuit Oliva. When they're in their official standoff, the mangaka specifically focused on the effect, the moment after a punch is landed, to explain something about the human brain. There's a panel where Baki is standing in a fighting position and Oliva's approaching him. The very next panel is Oliva immediately slumping over after getting knocked out. This would showcase how fast and strong Baki truly is, and also explaining an event that happens in the human brain. Oliva explains that the conscious understanding of the world is delayed by half a second, that when a person moves, a signal is sent to the brain about 0.5 seconds before it happens. Like when a knife is thrown at you, the signal to your brain is sent, but your true consciousness comes half a second later, that you're basically unconscious during the 0.5 seconds it takes for the signal to reach your brain. And Baki struck Oliva in that very small moment of time to knock him out, which this whole scene was a perfect example of the effect of an impact in a fight scene. I can list many more examples of cause and effect in both comics and manga action scenes, but what I want to talk about is the other aspects of storytelling between the two. Comics usually are a branched out universe with many connecting titles, while mangas are typically their own self-contained story. A lot of people think that mangas are better when it comes to writing characters because they are a self-contained story, while comics are just apparently a jumbled mess of connecting storylines and, more recently, character assassinations. I've learned about character writing from both. Since a lot of comic characters have existed for decades, there's rarely a comic where it talks about their origin and their development. A lot of mangas, even if they're decades long, still have the beginning of a character's story. Both of them are amazing at representing aspects and ideas about characters. Superman is a perfect representation of altruism, hope, and heroism, along with Spider-Man. Omni-Man can represent the result of violent propaganda, being a victim of your own environment, and unlearning violence. Luffy is a perfect representation of freedom. Thorfinn and Musashi can represent redemption, peace, and self-improvement. Guts can represent the action and mentality of keep moving forward. Superman Up in the Sky is about Superman's belief of saving everyone, not allowing a single person to die, how the life of every single person matters, how he doesn't count the deaths of innocent civilians as collateral or casualties. A little girl named Alice is kidnapped by an alien and sent light years away from Earth. Superman, despite being told that she's just one person, that he's risking the safety of Earth and his loved ones by leaving to go find Alice, still decides to risk it all without a second thought to save her. With so many challenges his way, needing to outsmart a supercomputer, box an unbeatable opponent, he still refuses to give up and powers through everything to save her. There's a page where she asks Superman, why did he help that alien? He responds, because he needed it. She asks if don't other people need help? He says they do. She asks him if he's going to help everyone. He answers no, but I'm going to try. The same alien who kidnapped her ranted at Superman, saying that Alice was just one person. All that alien needed was just one human. That she doesn't matter. She's just some little girl, not an alien queen or the key to an empire. That she is worthless. And Superman responds, she is not. This comic represents Superman's pure heroism, his indomitable will, his altruism, representing the symbol of hope that he is going to try to save everyone. A lot of people viewed that little girl, who was light years away, as just one person, as just a casualty, but not Superman. Origin is about an android named Tanaka who wants to find out what it means to live properly. Throughout the manga, he fights several other androids with different abilities while keeping up a disguise as a robotics engineer. He deals with learning, feeling, and trying to understand the human emotions that he begins to feel, making improvements on his body to try to better fight against the other androids. This manga talks about things like life, that life sometimes means to endure, wanting to find the meaning in things, finding your own purpose. Long-form storytelling is prevalent in both comics and manga. Invincible, Hellboy, TMNT, One Piece, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Hajime no Ippo. With my own story, since it is a form of long-form storytelling, I was really intimidated at how long I wanted my story to be. I was scared that I'd lose interest and forget the meaning of my characters and the story, that later on it would be too dull and bland and worn out. But with the long stories in both comics and manga, it showed me that something like a long story, still being solid all the way through, is possible. A lot of people feel that stories in general shouldn't be too long since they'd get too overplayed or worn out, or the readers would get bored or something, so I felt a bit pressured to shorten my own story as much as possible. But with the long stories like Invincible, One Piece, Bleach, and a bunch of other stories, it showed me that it's possible, which would result in long-form storytelling being one of my favorite forms of it. The writers taught me to always keep things in mind and not to be scared about writing something, and all the stories I've mentioned have garnered great success from it. There's also comic book adaptations of non-comic characters and crossovers. I think these are valuable as, besides writing your own characters, comics like these helped me write other characters that weren't my own. I always had a hard time about writing characters that weren't my own because I have to hold boundaries with them. There comes pressure when you're writing other characters because fans would expect that character to act like they normally would. I always had a hard time trying to figure out what this specific character would do in this specific situation, like the crossover of the Ninja Turtles and Batman, where the Shredder is taking over Gotham. As a writer, you need to know what Batman would do in that scenario. Yeah, other characters have attempted to take over Gotham and have even succeeded. But what about someone like Shredder, who would be more dangerous than just about every other villain in Batman's rogues gallery? Yeah, Batman's fought master martial artists, strategic geniuses, crime bosses who are insanely rich and have access to henchmen. But the Shredder is basically all of that combined, plus some. You also gotta take into account what Shredder would do too. Who would he trust as an ally and who would he have to dispose of? How would he take over Gotham? He's got a lot of money and power. He's got to take over it financially first, meaning he'd need to overpower the Penguin, who's all about money and henchmen. But how would he do that? He's got to fight other villains like Killer Croc, and Shredder can casually fight off Leatherhead, so Killer Croc shouldn't be an issue. There is organized crime in Gotham, but Shredder back in his New York was always able to casually overpower any crime organization, so the Falcone crime family, for example, shouldn't be a problem. But what about the fact that the mutagen/ooze is in Gotham? That's gonna be a problem for both Batman and Shredder. Batman's probably gonna have to try to reverse engineer the chemistry of the ooze and fight off villains powered up by it. Shredder's gonna have to deal with them too. Like, let's say for example Bane, one of Batman's most dangerous enemies, incredibly smart and incredibly strong, getting even more powered up by the ooze and, say, turning into an elephant. Now it's a very big problem, so the writer is going to have to figure out how they would act in that scenario, or the crossover of the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers. There's also the crossover of Godzilla, King Kong, and the Justice League. Speaking of Godzilla, there's Godzilla Rulers of Earth, one of my favorite comic series, illustrated by one of my favorite artists since I was a kid, Matt Frank. This is a separate universe to the other incarnations, yet the writer was still able to capture the character of Godzilla. He knew what Godzilla would do in specific scenarios, assuming that this is probably the Millennium version of Godzilla or his own version that acts similar to some others. Comic adaptations of non-comic characters can also enlarge the lore of a character, what they are, where they're from. The Predator comics really do expand a lot on the lore of the Yautja species, like the fact that the females are actually larger, stronger, and more aggressive than the males, and even how the Yautja species and culture came to be. Essentially, crossover comics and comic adaptations of certain characters can help you understand how to write other characters that aren't your own. It can push you out of your comfort zone, drive you to research as much as you can about a character, and add your own elements while also being faithful to who they really are. For years, I've been wanting to write my own stories for Marvel, DC, and the Ninja Turtles, and even Godzilla, wanting to become a screenwriter and director and make my own movie adaptations. The idea of writing other people's characters was so intimidating for me, but when I'm reading how the writer is able to capture the characterization of each character and apply it to scenarios and have that character act in the way they would, making it make sense, it was able to help me be more comfortable with writing things like that. You know what I mean, right? The big difference between comics and manga is the use of color. Of course, there are some manga that do use color, and not all comics use color, like The Crow for example. But the use of color is a big difference between the two. Through studying art and using comics as references, you can better understand the use of color in a panel. Shredder in Hell is amazing at this. The use of a foggy red when he's fighting the demons in Hell. The use of gray during Orokusaki's flashbacks. The abstract kind of blurry, foggy colors used in the forest scene, showing that Oroku is not in New York or Japan or even on Earth, but in fact a dream. The use of color can really show the reader the type of environment that the character is in, not just specifically which background, but which type of environment, the settings and mood of it, that something is off. I've always loved the use of color during the House of X/Power of X storyline for the X-Men, when the mutants are finally able to seek refuge and go to an island called Krakoa. The vibrant colors of the unique plant life and Krakoa itself as it's a living island has always caught my eye and made me stare at the pages for a while, just studying or appreciating the colors. Honestly, seeing these pages without color kind of removes the impact of it. It just doesn't hit as much, you know what I mean? It can make a scene much more intense, especially if the colors have to do with what's going on with the character in it, like in Spawn Resurrection, when Spawn grabs the Sword of the Spirit and gains immense power. The page explodes with a green ectoplasm, as green was always a signature color for the Spawn character, and story-wise shows his increase in power. You can learn a lot about color from studying and using comic books as your reference to your art. Something that I always appreciated about drawing both comics and manga is that you can use just about anything to draw one. A lot of artists use digital art while a lot of others use pencil and ink. One artist that I want to bring up is Takehiko Inoue, an amazing author and illustrator for some amazing manga like Real, Slam Dunk, and Vagabond. He's been praised for his amazing art in his mangas, especially Vagabond. In some parts, Takehiko actually drew the whole thing with just a brush, and there's been multiple videos of him painting large portraits. His ability to perfectly map out the proportions and where the details should be on such a large canvas is amazing, and the fact that he can do it either bending over or crouching is insane. Daniel Warren Johnson is an amazing comic artist who's worked on stories like Superman Red and Blue, Jurassic League, Beta Ray Bill, and Do a Powerbomb. His work is amazing, and when you see him draw, it seems that he mostly uses a 2B pencil for the sketches and a brush pen for inking. With just those two, he's made some amazing pieces of art that really blows me away every time I look at them. I've often watched manga artists like Yusuke Murata, the artist behind the amazing work of One Punch Man, draw his pieces. I've often wondered the process of even beginning a single sketch for some of the amazing pieces that he's drawn and other artists in general. A big help to my art was Jim Lee. I remember just binging his art tutorials like Anatomy, dynamic poses, shading. He's an icon, and he's been behind some amazing, iconic pieces of characters that when you think of that character, that drawing might be the first thing to appear in your mind. Studying from both comics and manga is one of the best things I believe that you can do for yourself. Whether you're writing or illustrating your own story, learning what colors to use, the anatomy, shading, the environment, you can understand a lot of things from both comics and manga. I never really understood why people say either one is better than the other when they are both great in their own ways and can complement each other so well. I've learned a lot about drawing fight scenes from mangas like Baki the Grappler, Dandadan, Kengan Ashura, Sakamoto Days, Kenichi, Hajime no Ippo, One Punch Man, Rooster Fighter. I've learned a lot about using colors like Batman Superman World's Finest, the TMNT Power Rangers crossover, Godzilla Rulers of Earth, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, Immortal Hulk. I've learned a lot about drawing backgrounds and environmental destruction from stories like Godzilla's Half-Century War, Akira, Dandadan, World War Hulk, Chainsaw Man, Kaiju Number 8, Evangelion. I learned about writing characters from stories like Invincible, Berserk, The Watchmen, Superman Up in the Sky, Vagabond, The Walking Dead, Vinland Saga, All-Star Superman, One Piece, Ultimate Spider-Man, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, TMNT, Monster, Hellboy. I never understood why people always needed to have a competition between both comics and manga. I never really understood why people were always so stubborn to check out one or the other. I feel like they both can complement each other very well, and when it came to all the observable things in it, anatomy, backgrounds, perspective, character development, arcs, origins, to me, I always understood that both of them were great at doing all those things. And throughout my time as learning to be an artist and writer myself, dreaming to hopefully become a famous artist and writer, observing both comics and manga has been the best thing for me. I never limited myself to one thing when I can learn many things from them both. That I can have whatever art style I want. That I can write whatever story I want. How to balance things in the story. Back in high school, I would find a random page of a manga or comic on my phone, and since I had 3 art classes a day for some reason, I would just observe the page and draw it exactly as I could on the paper. And it helped me. It helped me a lot. It helped me understand more fundamentals that previously I couldn't even try to imagine it, giving me more experience drawing things outside of my comfort zone. Comics and manga are both amazing in their own ways. There is nothing wrong with either of them. It doesn't always have to be a competition when you're talking about the two, when instead, it could be about what's so good about either of them, where you can learn from them both like I did and still do. From the variety of both mediums, the authors and illustrators of both sides, the ideas, concepts, and inspirations, the vast amount of material and skills you can learn from absorbing both is a great amount. Thanks for watching. Tell me what you think in the comments. Please like, comment, subscribe. I got links in my social description. Be kind to yourselves and each other. Thanks for watching.